Hey everyone, and welcome to 412 Kids. This is the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette's parenting podcast. I am your host. My name is Abby Mackey. I am a Post-Gazette health writer. I am also a registered nurse with most of my experience in pediatrics. And today it is my pleasure to be here with you to talk about the concept of mindful parenting. Now, those two words are super familiar. They're everywhere in media, but I promise you that this is not a tired topic. In fact, if you are someone who has explored mindfulness on your own, you will find that this is actually a revolutionary idea compared to a lot of what exists out there. So if you're somebody who has dabbled in mindfulness, maybe there are a few reels on Instagram that you were interested in, or if you're someone who has read every book that Jon Kabat-Zinn has ever written, you have probably noticed that many of the recommendations for how to integrate mindfulness practices into your life don't exactly jibe with a parent's schedule. For instance, sometimes people talk about the idea of eating mindfully. So you are going to create a plate of food for yourself that engages all of the senses by using colors and textures and favorite foods. And as you are creating this plate, you're going to be thinking about the gratitude you have for the farmers who created it and that this food is available to nourish your body. And you're going to eat this plate of food in tranquility and silence and slowly as you consume this delicious dish. Okay, that's great. And I love farmers and I love food, but it is very rare for parents to be able to sit there and in a relaxed way eat a meal. More often than not, we are eating the odds and ends off of our kids' lunches. This just really isn't in the cards a lot of the time. Another example is the thought that we should be waking up ahead of our children to create this pocket of time for ourselves. Sounds great. Even more, they talk about, taking a section of time to meditate, to read, to journal, to do yoga during this magnificent theoretical time that you have on your own. If you can do this, do it. It sounds like a fantastic idea. But for so many parents, it would be a terrible health related decision to actually try to wake up ahead of your children if you happen to have children like mine who wake up very, very, very early. You are helping no one if you are getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning if you did not go to bed a full 7 or 8 hours ahead of that. So, how do we do this differently? That is the question we are going to try to answer in this podcast. And one of the ways that we are going to propose that we try to create a pocket of mindfulness during our day in a way that parents can actually do it is a little bit of a liberal take on what mindfulness might mean. But we're going to engage with this idea proven by science that music actually has the power to transport us somewhere else, particularly when we try to listen to the music of our younger years. I am talking about high school. I am talking about young adulthood, maybe college if you went. That music, think about the feelings you get when you turn on the Strokes, when you turn on, I don't know, I'm making stuff up, the Plain White Tees, whatever band was so special to you during that time that reminds you of that party you went to, that concert you went to, and the way it makes you feel. It is a whole body sensation of this excitement. And neurology would argue that this is the psychological experience, the neurological experience of nostalgia. And it really works. This isn't just something you're making up. This isn't something that only happens to you. And another one of those bands that might create that experience is the Clarks. And that is why Scott Blasey is our guest today. Not only is he the lead singer of the Clarks, he is a solo artist in his own right, and he is a dad, and he's joining us today. Scott, thanks so much for joining us. So, Scott, thank you so much for joining us to talk about the idea that music can have such a tremendous impact on our happiness, especially when we delve back into the music from our younger years. And we're so lucky that a lot of the music you've created is exactly that for us.
Well, thanks, Abby. First of all, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate this. Music has been obviously a life-changing thing for me. particularly in my childhood. I absorbed so much of it. My father had music playing around the house all the time. And it's just always been a source of joy and inspiration for me. And I've sort of passed that on to my kids. And I was, fortunate that I was able to start creating it and making people's lives a little better through our music.
For sure. Now, what was that music that was played in your house when you were a kid?
Oh, well, my dad loved everything. He was a World War II generation. My parents were a little older. So, there was stuff like he liked standards, big band stuff, Bobby Darin, Louis Prima, but he also loved R&B and soul music, Bill Withers and Marvin Gaye and Gladys Knight and the Pips and that kind of stuff. And then it wasn't uncommon to hear stuff like Willie Nelson or Eddie Rabbitt, country music. So it really didn't matter the genre. If he liked it, he was playing it.
That's fantastic. Now, the research that we're talking about, it really does center around sort of probably high school time, young adulthood, and there are a number of reasons why that period of time really sinks into our memories more than others. Some of it is hormones, some of it has to do with psychological theory. So that's what you grew up on. But when you had the chance to make your own choices, what
Right.
were you listening to during that time?
Well, to sort of, jump off of what you were just talking about, I talk about sometimes at my shows, when I do solo shows, I tell a lot of stories and I reference that time period from I was born in 1964. So from, about 5 years old, 6 years old, 1970 until about, 1980, those were very formative years for me, the 70s. And so I was listening to the radio all the time. And of course, the stuff that I had just referenced that my dad was playing. But those 70s songs, they were huge. And so that time period, from about 5 years old, 6 years old till, mid-teens. And then, of course, beyond that, I just absorbed all that music that was on the radio. I would hear that stuff. And, I had record players. At that time, it was record players and 8-tracks and cassettes and that kind of thing. So when I got a little older, went off to college, at that point, it was the 80s. So it was very much for me discovering the new music that had hit. Punk rock started in the late 70s, and the offshoot from punk rock was sort of what we used to refer to as new wave music, which was, the Smiths and REM and U2. They were still very much underground college bands. So those were the bands that really affected me. And there were some guitar-based rock bands in the 80s that didn't quite reach the popularity levels of some of those bands I just mentioned. Bands like the Replacements and the Hoodoo Gurus and the Rave Ups that were really influential on the Clarks, that when we started playing, those bands were the template for what we were doing.
You were so lucky to grow up when everything on the radio in the 70s is what was on the radio. I couldn't be more jealous of that era.
Right.
That's what I was raised on, and in a big way, that's what I held on to. So that's played in our house too. We have a 5-year-old and a 10-year-old, but that's what they hear still. So I hope we're doing the Lord's work there.
That's great.
Now you are a dad of 3 children, right?
That's right.
How old are they?
Denise and I have 3 beautiful, healthy daughters. Sophia is 19. She's a freshman at IUP. Ava is 17. She's a junior in high school. And Gracelyn is 14. She's in 8th grade.
So IUP like you, right?
That's correct. She's a legacy. She's I want to say hopefully not following in all of my footsteps. Blazing her own path. She's making good choices and really loves Indiana. So we're very
Great.
lucky.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, being a musician, you probably did not keep the 9 to 5 hours that a lot of dads do. Did that allow you to be around a little bit more as they were growing up during the day and things like that? How did that work in your house?
Absolutely. I was and still am Mr. Mom. That's my day gig. I'm very fortunate that when I'm doing shows, it's generally weekends and at nights during the week. So I have been and continue to be home all the time. I'm getting them up for school. I'm making them, preparing dinner, getting them food when they need to be fed, and taking them to various activities, whether it's dance classes or what used to be, sports practices. They're in the theater now, and they're a little older. So, Ava drives, and Sophia's off to college. So my chauffeur duties aren't quite as time consuming as they used to be. But yeah, I've been very lucky to be a big part of their lives, and I wouldn't trade it for the world.
This sort of applies to my family in a funky way. My husband is one of our sports columnists, and so we have these two little kids, and they go to all of these sporting events. We're around sports all the time, and in some ways that really draws them to it, and in some ways it repels them, right? So they're
Right,
like, "Oh, this is just dad's job. We don't want to do that," you know?
right, right.
So I wonder in your house how your kids interacted with music. Is it like this great font of excitement and things that they want to do like their dad, or are they
Yeah.
sick?
Well, a little of both, just like kind of like what you just referenced. Certainly early on, music captivated them like it captivates a lot of young kids. One of my favorite memories is our middle daughter, Ava, was maybe 3 or 4 years old at the time, and Taylor Swift, I think it was the Speak Now album was out. This was like 2007, 2008.
Hmm.
And there was a song called Love Story that she had heard. And she's 3 or 4 years old. And she asked me to learn how to play it on guitar so that she could perform it. She could sing it at one of our shows. And she did just that. And I have a video of it. And it's adorable. She didn't know all of the words, and I sort of helped her through it. And it was really, I don't think early on they understood, that dad was in a band. It wasn't until they got a little older, they started coming to some concerts. And then they're like, wow, this is really cool. Look at that on stage. And there's this big audience, and they're singing along to his songs. And then it got really cool, I think, when they got to be a little older and they were teenagers, and suddenly their friends, their peers, knew that I was in a band, and then maybe their parents were fans at one point, or certainly once they got to middle school and high school, a lot of their teachers, who were, in their 30s and 40s, they sort of grew up on the Clarks if they grew up around here. So they thought that was pretty cool. But there was definitely a time period as well where it was like, Dad's got a show tonight. Do you guys want to go? It's like, no, they'd rather ride bicycles with their friends, or play games on the computer or what have you. So a little of both. But they all love music. They all played piano, and two of them still do. And the two younger ones are really into musical theater. Ava, our middle daughter in particular, it's sort of her passion. So it's an amazing feeling for me to watch her on stage and seeing her sing and dance and act. It just takes my breath away.
I love that. I was a theater kid too, so I love hearing about
Oh
kids
yeah,
in theater.
then.
Yeah, it's so much fun. Absolutely one of the most fun things I've ever done. Okay, so if you didn't have this typical 9 to 5 gig,
Right.
right? But you were doing all the dad stuff all day, that
Okay.
probably doesn't leave a whole bunch of time for sleep, I would imagine, right?
Right.
And we always like to glean best practices from parents that we talk to on here. I mean, nobody's an expert, but everybody's an expert at the same time,
Right.
right? We're all good at our own things.
Right.
So I just sort of wonder when it came to times where you were sort of feeling at your wits' end, or the TV's blaring and kids are fighting and you haven't had a lot of sleep. What
Right.
kinds of things did you do to sort of right the ship in that moment? Because this idea of tapping into the music from our youth is
Mhm.
one of these things we're talking about that could potentially do that for us right in that moment. So, what other things did you try to use right in those tough times?
Well, first of all, Abby, we as parents, we're all human and we all make mistakes. And
Sure.
I've certainly made my share of them. And I'll be the first one to look in the mirror and say, what could I have done better? How could I have approached that situation differently? There have been situations, thankfully, not a lot of them, where I, laid my head down at night and thought I made a bad situation worse. My actions escalated what was going on. And, you just live and learn. And certainly with our oldest daughter, it was sort of a test run. For me, I would always, and what you had talked about, it was often in those moments of if you're maybe hungry, or you haven't had a lot of sleep, or there's something else going on that's frustrating you in your life beyond your children. But then you find yourself in a situation where it's a difficult parenting moment. It's so easy to sort of lose your cool, lose your temper. I like to think of myself as cool, calm, and collected, and I always did until I became a parent. Um, but for me, really just taking 5 or 10 seconds and separating myself from the situation, maybe walking into another room, taking a couple deep breaths, and realizing, hey, they're just kids. This is not a huge deal. And drawing from experiences in the past, let's not make this situation worse. And there's that saying, you can't control their actions, but you can always control your reactions.
Mm.
And it's easier said than done. And there are certainly times when you're in the moment that maybe you raise your voice and you think, like, maybe I shouldn't have done that or shouldn't have done this. But for me personally, I think just walking away from a situation, I've done that a few times. I've just walked into my room, and maybe you hear them yelling, "Dad, Dad!" They want resolution, or there's something that needs to be addressed. But if I stay in that moment, I know that maybe it's not going to turn out the best. And so just a few seconds, 10 seconds away, close your eyes, take a couple deep breaths, and think, I can handle this. I'm going to try to do this the best way I can, even though it's challenging. And certainly with 3 daughters, there have been moments where it's been very, very difficult.
I'm sure. I'm sure. And I think it's also just difficult too when you have a household full of one gender and you are the other one,
Right.
because you and I are the same but opposites. My entire house, all males, even the tortoise, even the dog, all guys. So sometimes that can be rough.
We're in the same boat. We have 2 female dogs.
Oh, oh my gosh, yeah. I get it.
So yeah, it's the same thing. I try to embrace that as much as possible, and I know my kids and my wife lean on me to sort of be a steadying force. And I always say to myself, you're the rock. I mean, you have to, even when the hurricane is blowing all around you, you have to be steadfast, and calm as much as possible. Because your family, your children, they feed off of that. It's a really a top down thing. If they see that you can remain calm in a situation where they're not, they can learn from that. They can grow from that, and know that in their futures, they can remain calm in situations where maybe things are getting a little bit out of control.
Sure. Now you seem pretty introspective about all of this.
Yeah,
Your own way of being, how that impacts other people, the cues that they're taking from you.
right.
That's either inborn or you've worked at it. So which one is it?
I think it's honestly a little of both. I was very fortunate. My parents, I was an only child. My parents, like I mentioned, they were of the World War II generation. My father was a staff sergeant in the Army Air Corps. He went to Pearl Harbor right after the bombing. He was a very calm, strong guy, and my mother was too. And they were a little older when I was born. My dad was 45, my mother was 35, so they were established in their careers, mature at that point, certainly. And so I grew from them. I learned from them, and I saw how they handled situations, and certainly just having one child. And I was a pretty good kid, so I didn't, make it too difficult on them. But there were moments where they just knew how to handle situations, and so I had that basis. And like I said before, I always thought I was cool, calm, and collected until I became a parent. And so part of that was the upbringing was my foundation. But you have to learn. You have to go through those situations with your spouse and with your children, and you make mistakes. And you are, anybody that's going to be a parent, or certainly parents can relate to this. You're just not going to get it right all the time. And I've learned too. I think Apologizing when you don't get it right is crucial, to teach your kids that it's okay to screw up. It's just part of the human experience. We all do it. And if you do, just be genuine with them and say, honey, I'm so sorry. I handled that situation poorly. I could have done better. And don't say, but this is what you did to get me to that point. Leave that part out. You don't need to go back there. You just apologize for what you got wrong. I think that's a huge lesson. But I am introspective. I do. I care about being the best parent that I can be. And and again, it's a growing thing every day, and I'm still learning. And my kids are older, and hopefully I'm getting more right 99.9% of the time.
Well, and I'm sure their current or future partners will appreciate that, because nothing is quite as effective as a good apology, right? And those good apologies don't have a but at the end.
Right, exactly. And they appreciate it. I mean, it was not long ago, I won't go into detail, but I apologized to one of my daughters for a way I handled a situation, and I could see the relief that came over her face. She just broke into this little smile, and she said, "It's okay, Dad." And she gave me this big hug, and I'm getting a little emotional thinking about it now, and I certainly got emotional at the time with her. It means the world to them that you can, just be human with them, and not just be a parent, but be their friend, and say, I'm sorry, I really screwed that up. But it's really important. And to piggyback off what you just said about the opposite gender, if and when they have a partner, get married, whatever, I guess I'm the template for that. So, the relationship that I have with my daughters, I think about this a lot. The relationship that I have with my daughters, the loving, close friendship that I have, and the kind of relationship where they know they can come to me with any of their problems. And I've told them that as they're older now, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're not comfortable, I don't care if it's 3 o'clock in the morning, call me. I will help you. I will come get you. No questions asked. We'll discuss it later on, days down the road, whatever, once the emotions have cooled, or once we have, everybody's safe. But I am here for you, and I will do whatever I need to do. And hopefully my relationship with my kids will be something that they'll be able to use when they have relationships of their own when they're adults.
Sounds like you're a great dad, Scott.
Oh, thanks, Abby.
Those are great relationships you're creating there, it sounds like.
I hope so. I hope so. I think I do a good job. I give myself an A-.
That's still pretty darn good.
Thanks.
As they say, there was no rule book for this, right? We just sort of brought these creatures home from the hospital.
That's right.
Or the birthing tub, or whatever the case was. Right. I was raised by a musician dad too. Oh. And I wonder how intentional you were about teaching them about music when they were kids, because of course music was playing in our house all of the time, but it wasn't just that music was playing. It was, Ab, listen for the key change. It's coming, stuff like that, right? So is that going on with your kids too?
Absolutely. We insisted they take piano lessons when they started. They started playing piano very young. I think music has been proven to improve academics. Just the math that's involved, the logic that's involved, the art that's involved. There's so much to music that you can use in other areas of your life, and certainly in other areas in school. So we insisted on piano being played. And obviously, as a musician, as a guitar player, there were always just guitars and other instruments in the basement. And so they had access to that. They were exposed to that at a very young age. They were exposed to concerts, coming to my shows at a very young age. So they understood melody and timing and things at a really young age. And they sang, and one of the coolest things I'll never forget, they were really young, and they would be in the car singing together. And if one of them was singing the melody, the other one would start singing the harmony.
Oh my goodness.
It was just an inbred kind of thing, and I don't even
Yeah.
know that they realized what they were doing. And so they're all terrific harmony singers, and they sort of jokingly, as they got older, they got into high school and got into choirs and stuff. They said, a lot of my friends really struggle with singing harmony, and for them, it's just second nature. It's just like running across the yard barefoot. So it's been a really cool thing, and particularly with Ava, and certainly now with Grace too, they've taken what they've learned on piano and they're able to just pick up a guitar, pick up a ukulele, and just in 15 minutes watch a YouTube video and have, be playing a song, be playing a Taylor Swift song, or be playing something by the Smiths. I mean, they love old music too. They love Billy Joel, and so, and it was same with drums. I mean, I bought a drum kit a few years ago, and when I first had it, Ava just watched a YouTube video, and within 30 minutes, she's pounding out a beat, and I was like, man, that's super impressive, and that was the goal. I was always wanted to play piano when I was younger. I can play a little bit, but I'm sort of living vicariously through them when I hear them play piano now, and they do it now. Used to be you had to force them; they had to practice, and their piano teacher would come over to the house, but in the last couple of years now, sometimes when we walk in the door through the garage, they'll just walk straight back to the piano and just start playing their favorite song of the day by Olivia Rodrigo or whatever. And it's just the coolest thing. And it also is just such it's such a stress reliever, in their everyday lives. It's tough being teenage kids in this world today, particularly for young girls. There's so many demands on them academically, socially, and there's, social media and phones, and to know that they can just walk back there and put the phone down and bang out a tune on the piano. I know it gives them comfort and relief from stress and joy in their lives.
This is sort of half a scientific comment and half just opinion, but I'm a little bit like them. I can pick up instruments and just sort of start to play because of how I was raised, because I was always around them. And I think that because music really does engage so many parts of your brain at one time, it's like this instantaneous escape, right? You can't help but to only think about the singing and the playing or whatever you're doing, and not the other stuff, not the stuff that might be hounding you mentally, right?
Absolutely. And that really goes hand in hand with the idea of the best times in our lives are when we're living in the moment, when have a guitar in our hands and we're singing, or we're playing the piano. You're not thinking about what happened last week. You're not concerned with what you have to do next week or next month. You're just living in the moment. And those are the times of our lives that give us the most joy and the most comfort.
Sure. Now, speaking of singing and playing,
Mm.
there are probably people listening to this podcast right now that don't care at all about mindfulness. They may not even be parents. They might just be Scott Blasey fans or
Right.
the Clarks fans. And so tell us for a few minutes, whatever is going on with you as a solo artist, whatever is going on with the Clarks, how people can catch you coming up this summer. So what's new?
Great. Well, first of all, I was super excited to have released for the first time in 17 years original solo music. I put out a 3-song EP about 2 months ago, and it's called 3 the Hard Way. And it's got 3 original songs, and it's available on all the streaming platforms, Spotify and Apple Music and Amazon, wherever you get your music. You can find it. It's called 3 the Hard Way. And if you're interested in where I'm performing solo, I do a lot of solo shows. My website is scottblasey.com, and it has a list of shows. It has a current video for one of my new songs. And it also has links to all my social media sites, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and YouTube, my YouTube channel. So from that website, you can pretty much get all the information that you need regarding my music and my live shows. The Clarks are continuing to perform. We're in our 38th year together. We started in 1986. And it's just a remarkable thing that we're still making music together. We still have a great time on stage. And so we just are wrapping up 2 new songs that are going to be released here in the next month or so. So we're excited about that. And you can get more information on the Clarks at our website, clarksonline.com. And again, you can find information on shows and all the Clarks social media sites. So, busy, 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 Abby. I feel so fortunate. I'm so grateful to be able to make music, to perform music, to create music, and have it be such a big part of my life and the lives of our children.
Absolutely. And I'm sure that so many people who are going to come to these shows, your solo shows, the Clark shows, are people who saw you guys play when they were in high school, saw
Right.
you guys play, at the summer festival at their college, or,
Right.
at an auditorium somewhere, or when it was called Chevrolet Amphitheater before the Riverhounds existed, down there.
Right, right.
So, I just wonder for you, you guys have been playing together for so long. You have been a musician for so long. You're able to see all of these people who enjoy your music in this way. And now, sort of introducing this idea that our brains really do create a situation for us where we can tap into this music from when we were younger, and it can make us happy right in this moment, right now. And in the context that we're talking about, it can maybe even make you a better parent. Maybe it interrupts that tough moment where everybody's arguing.
Right.
How does it feel for you to know that things that you have created are able to do that for other people?
It's an amazing feeling, and I never expected it when the band started. When we started, we were in college, and it was just a way to have fun and to meet girls and to play it in fraternity parties. And we were just a cover band, playing our favorite 80s songs of the day. But I noticed 15 years in, 20 years in, we would start getting people coming up to us saying, "Hey, this song or that song really helped me get through a very difficult point in my life. Maybe my parent was ill, and it provided a lot of comfort." And then increasingly, as we got older, our fans would come up to us and say, my first date with my wife was at a Clarks show. And our music is very much the soundtrack to their lives, in the same way that the music that I loved and still continue to love is a soundtrack to my life. It's pretty crazy to think that the music that I've created, the music the band has created, is that soundtrack for other people. And that's just the greatest gift in the world. And when people say that to me, your music has been a big part of my life. It's the biggest reward. And I didn't really anticipate that when we were first starting out. It happened. It's like a flower growing out of the ground, after 15, 20, 25, 30 years together, you realize how big of an impact our music has had on people's lives. Just a beautiful thing.
Well, Scott, we are so grateful for all that you have offered us musically. Thanks for joining us today and sharing some of your best parenting tips. We really appreciate your time.
Abby, it's been a real pleasure. Great talking to you. Thank you.
You too. Thank you so much. Well, there's never a bad time to catch up with Scott Blasey, but I especially love this conversation, getting to know him as a dad, getting to know him as a family man, and what we will call an exemplary dad, just as we got to know Charlotte Hayward Wesley a few weeks ago as an exemplary mom. Now, if you are watching this podcast or listening to it, then my associated story is already live at post-gazette.com. And of course, some of Scott's comments made it to that story, talking about the value of music as an escape and a method of mindfulness all at one time. But I also leaned on scientific evidence and a local expert named Dr. Rebecca Brent, who is a clinical psychologist who really specializes in parenting and mindfulness, to tell us about more ways to experience this practice of mindfulness within a parent's busy schedule. So please go check that out as well. Now, before you go, our final segment is called 412 for You, and we're going to kick this off with a good cause. And there's probably no more agreed upon good cause than to help sick kids. And you're going to be able to do that for some of our local kids by participating in the UPMC Children's Hospital Foundation's Walk for Children's, meaning Children's Hospital, on Saturday, June 8th, to help fundraise for all of the great things that that hospital does. Now, just to drive it home a little further, you know, kids who benefit or people who benefit from UPMC Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, these are not just babies or elementary school kids or even teenagers. For some disease states, for some people who need this sort of specialized expertise, receive care there all the way up through young adulthood. So when you think about who you're helping when you help UPMC Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, just know that it encompasses this pretty sizable chunk of the lifespan. So if you want to participate in the walk, you can do it on a team, you can do it individually, you can do it in person, pretty much any way you want to. And to find out more information, go to walkforchildrens.org. Now, this podcast is called 412 Kids, but we are going to jump over the border to Ohio to the 740 just for a second. There are some young scientists at Indian Creek High School in Wintersville, Ohio, just about an hour or so away, who are doing some great science that might benefit our whole region. Now, if you have a kid who is into critters, into creeks, into the outdoors, you probably already know that the Pennsylvania state amphibian, and yes, Pennsylvania has a state amphibian, is called the Eastern Hellbender. Now, these guys are cool. Relative to other salamanders, they're pretty darn big, they're super slimy, and they are so ecologically important. If they exist in a body of water, that means that that is a really healthy, clean body of water. Now, the trouble is that there just aren't that many Eastern Hellbenders. So these science students at Indian Creek High School are one of 4 groups working with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources to help raise baby Eastern Hellbenders, in this case, 20 of them, to then be released into the wild to boost the population and hopefully avoid extinction. So huge shout out to these young scientists at Indian Creek High School who are doing such great things for our region. So the last thing is a headline. So I and health writers across the country wrote about a brand new tool in our medical toolkit in the fight against RSV, or respiratory syncytial virus. So in the vast majority of cases, RSV occurs in our younger kids. In the vast majority of cases, it's just a really nasty cold, a lot of congestion, cough, fever. Now, in the minority of cases, it can be life-threatening. It can require a hospital stay, supplemental oxygen, supplemental fluids. So the idea that this new tool called Beyfortus was going to be available to every baby under 8 months of age and was only going to be a single injection was really great news, because the other tool that was available was reserved for babies and kids who were medically complicated, and it was a series of injections. So huge improvements here in theory, so long as it works. And according to some interim findings that were published early in May in the highly respected medical journal, The Lancet, it is working. So it said that Beyfortus reduced RSV hospitalizations by 82% in infants younger than 6 months of age. So obviously this is really great news, and we will look forward to those final results when they come out, and I'm sure we will write about them. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much to Scott Blasey for joining us, and to Dr. Rebecca Brent for contributing to the story that is now live on post-gazette.com. I have been your host. My name is Abby Mackey. Our producers are Jacob Comer and Matt Rosenberg. Our editor is Polly Higgins. And as always, from all of us here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, it is our privilege to be on this journey with you and your 412 kids. See you next time.